Computer. We got it. Okie dokie. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, and I can hear you. So we should be recording. I don't know how you tell that, but do you know, Mark?
Yeah, it is. There's a button up on the left, way up on the left there. It'll say recording.
Oh, recording. There it is.
Yeah,
Cool.
yeah.
Okay.
So we're recording. I'm going to try to, I'm muting everybody here. So as we, I guess as we open it up to hear from people, we'll just ask you to unmute yourself, just that little microphone button. Somebody, I think it's, oh, here we go. There we go. All right. Do you want me to get it started, or do you want to just let people know about your idea, Lori, and then I could introduce you and say a few things?
Either way, whatever works. What do you think?
Well, it would be nice to just tell people about your idea.
Okay.
And
I was talking to Enric earlier. We were talking about how things just tend to land in our lap,
Uh-huh.
And that's how this webinar got started. And the reason I said to Mark that I really want to start out talking about that because it has a lot of parallels to being in the flow of dating, being in the flow of life, just being open to whatever comes our way, and all the thinking that we can do to get in the way of it. So just to back up a little bit, I think this really started out it started a couple of years ago. Brett from the UK, who runs Supermind, he and I thought, wouldn't it be cool to do some kind of dating something. We didn't really know what, but something for single people who are dating. So he put it on his header, that wonderful revolving header that shows the different things going on in Supermind. And somebody saw it and contacted me like a year later. We put all of that on hold. A year later, this person contacts me, and he's actually the same person who did the graphics for this because he's learning graphics. So that was just such a great thing. So that was the start where he said, when are you going to do that? And I said, well, I'll contact Brett, and then forgot to contact Brett. Then I'm sitting at the conference in October, right? The last conference we had, it was in LA. And out in the courtyard, I'm kind of playing hooky from one of the presentations. It just felt like I needed to be quiet. And in walks Mark. So he and I are having this conversation about what are we doing? What are we up to? Because I've known Mark for years, and we run into each other at conferences, and we used to run into each other at SID Talks. And so I was telling Mark that I'm working with 2 other women in 2 other parts of the country, and we meet on Zoom, and we're developing a webinar series for educators. Well, lo and behold, that got put on hold for different reasons. And then I said, and Mark is very encouraging. He says, I'm doing that too. It's really a great way to share the principles. So then I walk into one of the breakout sessions. Those of you who were at the conference might remember a young man named Francisco, who is this delightful person, and I would say, I don't know, late 30s or probably late 30s, because he's got this wife and infant baby in the audience. He gets on, he is talking about his insecurity in dating. And, it's like, what am I listening to? Because it's so hard to believe that that could be possible. Handsome young man, well-educated, I think he's an attorney, from an Ivy League school. This man is insecure about dating? So that really caught my attention. And it was like bells going off in my head. And I thought, gosh, it would be so much fun to do webinars about this. about being single and dating. And he, of course, talked about how learning the principles was the whole turning point for him. He could see that all of his insecurity was self-created in his own mind, and it looked so real whenever he was thinking it. It looks like absolute truth. And he woke up at some point to realize that it was just in his head. It's not the real deal. And things shifted for him. And there he was with this new baby, and his wife is delightful. So I went up to her after the session and I said, do you think that I would be able to interview your husband at some point? He's got such a great story. And she said, oh, of course. Here's the number. Call us. It'll be great. So that's one of my plans too. And, so this whole thing just flowed. It was never planned for. I never sat down and had the goal of doing dating webinars. It was just part of a flow. And so that's kind of what I wanted to start to talk to everybody about. That one of the things I am still learning, always in the process of learning, from whatever my level of understanding currently is of the principles, I'm just really seeing that when I'm open to a flow, when I'm not pushing and trying to make things happen, things happen that I would never have planned for, I never could have imagined. And it's super exciting. It's just so, I'm sure that some of you have had, maybe all of you have had this experience too. I don't know, you want to say something about that, Mark?
Well, Lori, that was really a really beautiful way of sharing how this came to be. And I remember that, I've known Lori, I don't know, since 1984. And
We're
and
both
so
10 then, right?
Yeah, we were very young at that point. Yeah, really. That's true. And we had this nice journey that we would see one another at Sydney Banks events or different seminars around these principles. And for people who are here that have not heard of the principles, there is a plan for Lori and I to share them at a subsequent webinar. But yeah, just meeting you serendipitous, because I wasn't able to get into my room yet at the 3PGC conference in Los Angeles, so I took a stroll and thinking if I might see anybody out in the patio, and there you were, and we connected again and thought, we talked about how we could do Zoom meetings, and then all of a sudden we decided on doing something like this together. And I just love I just love your vision for this, because I love helping people in relationship. And really, the only thing that gets in the way of people feeling comfortable, feeling secure, feeling connected in a relationship, whether it's the first date or subsequent dates, is really the thinking that they're doing. And the misunderstood use of this beautiful capacity we have to think, so we could get into self-consciousness, or we could begin to fault find or get opinions or not even listen well. So I love being able to help people see how innocently we can get into our usual thinking that doesn't allow us to have a nice, really comfortable connection to a person that we're dating. But also the other factor is my deep appreciation for listening, and to be able to listen to someone you're on a date with, or considering dating, or talking with before a date to see if this is somebody you want to go forward with. Is that the depth of listening you do really helps you see for yourself whether this is right for you, but also help you be able to come up with a way to talk about yourself that's really comfortable and has a certainty about it. So so my work with relationship just really fits really nicely to be able to help you and support you, Lori, with this vision about this webinar.
Yeah, it's great, Mark. It's wonderful to work with you all these years, and we never had the opportunity to work together.
Yeah, that's right.
So I feel really very privileged to be able to do this, you know. So should we get going and let's see what happens? And, you know, I want to encourage you all to ask a question whenever something hits you or comment on something. And Mark, you know, I love having you on this because from, you know, no matter how many seminars I've been to or, you know, books I've read, I'll still come up against a way of thinking about the principles that might not be as pure as, or I might not put it across as pure as I intend to. So if you hear anything like that, stop me and jump right in. Okay? So great having like checks and balances here, you know.
I'll be the principal's police.
Right. In a good way.
You know, I wanted
community policing, right?
Yeah. I wanted to share, this is really beautiful what you're doing, because many of my single clients use some of these internet matchup kinds of things like, what's it called, Match.com or Match.com. Things like that. And, you know, they come up against their own self-conscious thinking that causes them to have unneeded difficulties in trying to follow that through. But the other piece is a lot of them share the wisdom that comes to them when they do go to meet some people and they just know it's not right for them, and that they can trust that and not be critical of themselves for knowing this person just doesn't fit them well. And know that sooner in their lives, you know, to know that sooner without having to try it and really make sure if they're really seeing it right. So those experiences are really important to talk to people about, and this is a nice way to do it, Lori.
You know, I don't know if you know this, Mark. I don't know if I mentioned this to you, that I did a little survey. I asked people, what's it like for them being single and what are they up against, basically. And, you know, what I got was pretty interesting. They fell into three basic categories. One that I heard was a fear of rejection, right? Another one I heard was a fear of rejecting somebody, hurting somebody's feelings. You know, if you frame it as rejection, that just sounds like a negative term. And I love what you said, that it's not about rejecting somebody. It's about, you know, it's not quite the right fit to go forward. People make jokes in the single dating world as going out on a onesie or a twosie date. Meaning one date and you realize, you know, it's not quite right. 2 days, you try it a second time and then you realize it's not quite right. But the truth of it is, I have been on these sorts of dates and these people wind up being my friends. I can't tell you how many, a few of them signed up for this webinar. It's wonderful to have friendships that develop from just getting together with the potentiality, the possibility of, you know, maybe we can go the long haul. Yeah, you know what I almost forgot was to say Happy Valentine's Day to everybody. Isn't it?
Happy Valentine's.
What's that?
Happy Valentine's Day to
you.
Yeah. You know, it's wonderful to have a day in the year to celebrate love, and love comes in so many forms. So, you know, one of the things that strikes me is how often I have heard, and probably you have as well, that you have to love yourself first. How can you love others or someone else until you love yourself? And that has been, I've found that has been so misconstrued in the world, that I really started to see as my understanding of the principles grew, it's not about personal love. It's nothing about personal love. Loving, for me, loving myself is loving the essence of who I am, which is who all of you are as well. You know, that saying that pops up from time to time about the fact that we are spiritual beings living a human life. That's what I'm reminded of, that when you take away the negative judgments, when you take away all the thinking about comparing yourself to others or comparing somebody else to others, all that personal thinking that we do, if you strip all of that away, you have pure love. That's what's there always. It's always, and you see that because in your own life, that's what I love about the principles, that we learn from our own experience. So people like Mark and myself and others on the call who are teaching the principles, we're all pointing people in a direction. The direction is inside each one of us. Underneath all the thinking that we do, the negative thinking. And the way I experience it is how quickly I'll get into a feeling of love. I could drive up to my brother's house with a bunch of thought on my mind that has me in not a great mood. And the minute my two nieces open the door, I am just totally in love. They're 12 and 13. They're just love balls. And whatever thinking was on my mind, bam, it's gone. So to me, that's, and that just happens over and over again in life all the time. Whenever we drop or let go of negative thinking, we're left with a purity. Some people call it pure consciousness. I like calling it pure love. So it's really, I love launching this on a Valentine's Day. It just makes so much sense. It's not loving another person or loving our personal selves. It's about loving the essence behind all of us. How can you not be in love with this? It's just so awesome, awe-inspiring that we have this capacity to experience creation. And why do we have that? We have that because of the principles of mind, thought, and consciousness. That is in operation within every human all the time, whether they know it or not. It was always inside of me before I knew it. And that's the case for everybody. So actually, getting back to that little poll that I took, so what I heard was fear of rejection, fear of hurting somebody's feelings, and fear of having to give up a lifestyle that you've created that you really enjoy. Now, you'll notice, I see mostly people who already have some understanding of the principles, but I know there will be people listening to this who signed up and they can come in the middle of the day. They'll be hearing the recording. So for new people, I wonder what the new people would hear as the commonality between those three statements. There's this operative word, and most people are going to hear the word fear. Well, that's repeated, all of those possibilities. But really, the operative word that that I'm thinking is thought, because fear is nothing more than thought. And there's this acronym you've probably heard before, that fear, F-E-A-R, false evidence appearing real. I love that because it's so true. We just get so caught up in what appears to be a reality that we are creating ourselves. And the great thing is that it's all connected to a feeling because we feel what we think. So what a fail-safe way to know when our thinking is off course. To know that when you feel bad, that's an indication that your thinking is probably somewhere in the tanker and not something to take seriously. Give yourself a mental break and then come back to whatever it is, and you'll have a fresh perspective about that. Yeah, it's just such a gift. What a great Valentine's gift to have the principles to share with people. You know what? Because I know that I have a different life because of what I've come to understand about how mind, thought, and consciousness works to give us an experience of life every moment. I know that I have been able to let go of a lot of negativity because of that. Do you know, I spent a long time feeling shame that I was single. You know, here I am at this stage of my life. I had one marriage, and we both agree that's really, in my mind, the only way that makes sense for people to get divorced is if they both agree that they're not the best people for each other for whatever reason, like Mark was talking about. And if you can part feeling good about that, feeling like you're freeing each other up to find somebody who's more appropriate for you, then that's really getting a divorce with love. I have people in my life who are great friends with their exes, and their exes remarried, they remarried, and they go out for dinners together, the two couples. Why not? Why not? You know, but there's been so much societal thinking about what it means to be single in a world of couples, that somehow there's something bad about that or wrong about that. And that's conditioned thinking, that there's no truth to that. There are a lot of people in the world who choose to be single. They like their solitude, they like coming and going, their independence. There's nothing wrong with that. However, if you're single and holding yourself back from meeting other people because you've got one of these fearful thoughts going on, fear that you're not good enough, or fear that whatever it is that keeps you from just being open to meeting people, then that's when it's not a good idea. That's when it's time to really search within yourself and see how your thinking could be holding you back. I have found it just fun. It's just enjoyable to meet other people. And I've found that it's really important to do that without having expectations that whoever I'm going to meet is going to be the one for the rest of my life. Boy, that's pressure, isn't it? To have that on your mind. And a lot of people do. They get themselves all worked up. And I hear about these long distance relationships, and you know, one gets off the plane and the other one's meeting them, and they say, holy cow, that's not even the person I've been talking to. You know, it looks like a whole different person. All kinds of really funny stories about that, because you got to realize we're all doing the best we can, given how things are looking to us in that particular moment. So if somebody, you know, if you're on a dating site and you meet somebody who's years older than the picture they've put up, well, you know, pre-principles, before I really had a better handle on mind, thought, and consciousness and how they interact to give us a reality, before that, pre-principles, I'll call it, I would get really angry and aggravated. How dare you? You know, I would get into that. And I have a funny story about it, but, you know, I'll tell you all privately. It's not one of those things you want to talk about in public. but it's really a great story. And the point that I'm trying to make is that post principles, I really have so much more compassion for people. So they put a picture up that's 10 years, 20 years younger than who they are. Maybe they look in the mirror and that's what they see. That's good for them. I would like to look in the mirror and see myself 20 years younger. It's not a bad deal. So, another thing is having a sense of humor about stuff and seeing that we are all really the same. The only thing, and I'm seeing this more and more, let me tell you, the only thing that separates us is our physical form and our different thinking. It's the only thing that separates us, because we're all coming from the same energy, whatever that is. It's the same life force, the same really love energy. Why is it that people want a couple? Why do we have that desire to be with another? Because it's great to share and to experience love at that level.
Lori, I was talking about that on a webinar Friday last week about, the true nature being this, that we are connected to one another, that we all the same energy, and that we could have this feeling of connectedness to anybody we meet. And you've shared a lot around this, and I think it's really a nice place to start for this first webinar, that the only thing that gets really in the way of that connectedness is our own thinking. Either we have expectations on ourselves or we put that on the other person. But given that they are love, the energy that we would call love, that they are pure love, as we are, you could try to find that. Yes. It doesn't mean that you may enjoy going further with this person, but really in terms of whatever you're looking at in terms of dating for yourself, you could look to find that in that person, looking beyond maybe what they're sharing, because my guess is some of the tone of what they're sharing is coming from their own insecure thought.
Right.
I think that's the compassion you talk about, Lori, that I love, is that you can meet somebody for the first time and really have understanding that they too might be vulnerable to be getting caught up in insecure thought. And so they may not come across as, as soft as you'd like or as warm as you'd like, but you could still try to listen and discover the deeper feelings of love within them that might show up as generosity or gratitude or something like that. So I love that. And I remember I was talking to this group, and it was a group of mental health professionals, and I was talking about how love is really within us. And if we meet someone and live in that feeling, we will fall in love with them. So this psychiatrist raised her hand and she said, I'm going on a date tonight, Mark. Does that mean if I'm in that love with this person, I could go ahead and marry this person who I'm just meeting tonight? And I said, well, look, if I don't lose my credibility with you, yeah, what's the difference except that you start getting into fault finding, or you get into your expectations. So we had a laugh about this truth that, as Lori, you've shared so much, in a beautiful way, that the more we can see that. We're vulnerable on a first date, for example, or just meeting somebody on one of these sites to get caught up in insecure thinking, and kind of keep that quiet and look for this essence in the other person. Just look for it. Sydney Banks talked about, everybody has wisdom. It's another way he talked about it. And if you could meet someone and look for that within them, you'll feel a deep connection. And that's what everybody's looking for is that understanding of that deep connection. And then you'll know whether to go forward or not. So I just wanted to share that with what you've been sharing, Lori.
Yeah, that's great, Mark. Thanks. Yeah, you're reminding me of, listening, that so many people listen through their own thinking, through their own ideas of what's being said. I spent a lot of time with clients. I don't know if you all know that I have a practice with as a marriage and family therapist, and I'm licensed in the state of Connecticut. And it's been so interesting since around 1985 that I've seen so many couples in various stages, either dating or premarital. They come in for premarital counseling, or just to kickstart their relationship again. They've been together for a long time and things have gotten pretty mundane, or helping them separate in as kind of way as possible. And so the main thing, like, they will come in and they will say, I would venture to guess it's like 95%, maybe more, where they all say, we have a problem communicating. And you know what I say? It's not a problem communicating, it's a problem listening. That's what we find. And they're amazed to find out that there's a story about this in the book that Chris Heath and I are writing. The Secret of Love is the first part of the title. And it's all about couples and what they have gone through. And this one couple, he's listening to her, and all of a sudden he says, holy cow, this is the same story you have been telling me for like the last year about what's going on in your office. And this is the first time I've actually heard that it's not about you standing up for yourself. It's about the whole other thing. And he was just talking to her, and saying, I've heard this story so many times, stop it. And she'd keep telling him the story because she never felt satisfied, that her story was being heard. And lo and behold, he really hears what she is trying to get across to him. And then she felt his compassion because he really got it. You don't feel compassion from somebody else, even if they're giving you compassion. If they're giving you compassion over a whole different thing, a whole different concept of what you're trying to get across. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Lori,
Yeah.
that's really cool. Now, I wonder, given the time, Lori, if we should check in to see if anybody has a question or...
Yes, good idea. Thanks.
Yeah. If anybody has a question or something you want to share, just unmute yourself. Just hit that microphone that's down below your picture or your whatever. Anybody have a question or something you want to share?
I've got a comment, if that's okay. When Lori was talking about premarital, I had to shuffle in my chair because I got jitters about the word marriage. I've got a lot of thinking about it. So I was engaged once, and lovely man, but just the thought of going through the process, I couldn't get ahead with it. So yeah. So I pulled the plug on it. And that was, let me see. Almost 10 years ago. So sometimes I find myself wondering if I've made the wrong decision. We are still good friends. In the meantime, he moved on with his life, got married, and they are expecting their first baby for May. And we still talk on the phone. We're good friends. We haven't seen each other for a long time, person to person, but we talk over the phone. But is that all that thinking about marriage? What does it mean in terms of roles? Really, I do love my independence, so I don't know if I'm ready to let it go yet. Could you please talk about that? Thank you.
Sure. That's a great question. Yeah, I know people in my life as well who have, they call it the M word, as though it's something terrible. Yeah, it's great to recognize that it's your negative thinking that's getting in the way for you. You know, that's all it is. Because underneath it, what you're looking for is a feeling of connection.
Mm.
It doesn't matter the form that it takes.
Mm-hmm.
What does that matter? You know, so if your partner really wants to be married, just find out, ask, you know, why is that so important to you? What does that mean to you? And really listen to what is going on for that the other person, and you know, see what comes. See what comes. The form is not the thing. The feeling is the thing. That's what you're looking for, is a really beautiful connection. And I know people who have that, who have always, they've been in a long-term marriage and they've always lived on opposite coasts. Isn't that interesting? One was a professor, another one was had something to do with not the NEA, but you know, the big arts governmental position in that state. So neither of them could leave their states. And they had a beautiful relationship. They'd get together in the middle on weekends and rehab a condo in Chicago. And I think they have a place in Greece. You know, so what does it matter? How it you know, the little, we get so caught up in what society says or our past experiences. You know, you had a bad experience in being in a marriage. It doesn't mean that that's going to be the case the next time around.
Well, I think those are great points. I think that you know, we're talking about something really in terms of it being formless. Love, true love, it really has no form to it. But then it looks like you know, there's some form we need to take, like marriage. Marriage is just an idea. It's just a form. And so we start to get thinking about that. And then that thinking may take us away from the loving feelings we were living in. And you know, you live in a loving feeling with another person, or just in life, or with yourself, and you've got the freedom to choose any form you want it to take. But you have to. But what happens for people is they start thinking about the form, a particular form their love is going to take. And so then that form becomes something that they get thinking about. And then we get the whole range of thinking, insecure thinking. Sometimes we can get, you know, positive thinking about it sometimes. But I think what's helpful is just to see that that's just a form two people's connections might take. You don't want to think about the form. You want to keep reminding yourself of the feeling in you that got awakened as you met this person. And that'll take care of you. And to help yourself recognize when you get into thinking about a particular form it has to take. There's, you know, once you get into the physical world, there are the traditions and expectations that people have made up. And that's where the thinking comes in that might get people fearful about a certain form their relationship might take. But always coming back to the love and understanding that's underneath that helps. I mean, every couple I've seen are convinced that the love is gone. They've got to move on to another relationship. But like Lori mentioned, what they're suffering from is that they've just got into these habits of thinking about one another in ways that make them feel bad. They start to find faults. They start to get negative opinions. They start to be judgmental. And that takes people away from the love and understanding they started with. So if you find yourself getting out there in some insecure thought about where to go in a relationship, just come back to the deeper feeling in you and stay reflective with that feeling. That'll guide you.
Yeah, well said, Mark. That's great. Absolutely.
Oh, thank you, Laurie. I really did want to be well said, Laurie. I was hoping it was well said. No, thank you, Laurie. Thanks for saying that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Laurie, you want to check with anybody else?
Yeah, I love having interactive webinars, so it's great. Christian.
Yeah, I'll ask a question. What do you make of, I've heard George Pransky say that the right mindset, you could be happily married to anyone. And I kind of get what he's saying, because obviously all feeling coming from thought. And having said that, what do you make of the situation where you can really enjoy being with someone, but not have that spark? No desire for it to turn into something sexual.
So I'm not sure if your question, Christian, you mean what do we think about?
I just wondered. Yeah, if you've got any observations about that, if that is that need for a spark, a kind of outside in irrelevance, because it doesn't feel like that. Or what do you do about it if there's no spark?
Well, I think what the grain of truth is that if you find someone, and that feels right to you, and you have a deep feeling of love and connection and understanding, you could be happily married the rest of your life if married is the form you want to take with that person. And the truth of that is, because the only thing that get in the way of you being happily in that relationship is your own thinking about the person. And really, here's the other part to that. When you first start out with someone, you really, really don't know the humanness of them. You really don't. And that relationship can continue to evolve with you seeing more and more of their humanness, because both of you start to get your own personal thinking out of the way of that relationship. And as you do, it grows deeper. That's when people talk about their relationship growing deeper. It's just that they have been able to put to rest a lot of thinking that gets in the way of being happily in a relationship, whether it's marriage or some long-term way that people are in a relationship. I think a spark is really just you being in your deep feeling of love. However, I do think that you can use your own wisdom to know if somebody's right for you. I don't think that George may disagree with me on this, but I don't think that you just meeting somebody at the store means that you can be happily married to that person forever. It may be that person just doesn't fit you. But when you do find someone that really feels right to you, it could be forever in your life, because the only thing that'll get in your way are these fears that come up, expectations that come up, opinions that come up. And if you know that's just your own making, and it allows you then to look at that person beyond those thoughts, and you see that person deeper. And each time you see that person deeper, you get more love. So that's my take on your question. I hope it was helpful, but that's what I would take about that.
Yeah, what occurred to me, Mark, as you were talking about that, is when any two people have their eyeballs on what form their relationship is going to take, that really takes away from being in the moment with that person. You know, if it's going to become some kind of form where you cohabitate or get married or whatever, that will just flow. That'll flow. That'll occur. It'll, you know, be part of the flow that we talked about at the very beginning of this webinar, that's really the flow of life. It's nothing we have to have on our mind. Thankfully, I mean, aren't we lucky? You know, we live in a society where we can all be independent. We don't have to depend on another person for our livelihood. It's, you know, it's just something to be so grateful for. But if you want to get together and cohabitate, you could have fun talking about that possibility and see where that leads. So again, it's coming back to a nice feeling. And, you know, when I've been on dates, I'll notice, you know, I get caught up in thinking, and then I let it go. And I come back to the moment, and I just go into listening. You know, the feeling of being curious about another human, seeing how they think and what they're up to and the experiences they've had. It's fascinating. It's really interesting to just take in a person and not have it have to mean anything or be anything. Does that make sense to people?
Can I add one more thing? I think that thought is this gift we're given. And it helps us to know whether this person is somebody you want to do what Lori and I are pointing to be curious with them. Of course, if you're in that state of understanding, you can see their humanness. But many of my clients have grown to feeling more secure about themselves by recognizing that thought, that they may also get through from the gift of thought, the sense that this person is not the person they're looking for. It comes through thought too, it must. There's nothing wrong with that. So I have had clients who have been able to get more secure because they've been able to really see what they would love to have, what characteristics would be important to them, given what we've already shared. And they've been able to do that and find somebody that, boy, they could really share this feeling of love together, and also be able to recognize the thinking that gets in their way of going further. But it was really helpful for them to have the gift of thought so they could really recognize for themselves, this person's nice, I enjoyed the time, but not quite where I want to go right now. And that's been valuable for some of my clients who have not felt strong to kind of call it their way. You know what I mean by that? To just kind of follow what feels right for them.
Yeah, and that kind of brings up that one of the fears that someone or a number of people talked about in the poll, which was, you know, this fear of the other person not wanting to be with us, or this fear that we don't want to be with the other person because we'll hurt their feelings. Well, if you can see that that's all coming from your rendition of what's going on, it's coming from thought. It's coming from this invisible power that we have to think things up. And, you know, you don't have to worry about that stuff. If you're a kind person and you just let the other person who may want to spend more time with you, if you just let them know that, you know, it just doesn't feel right to me, but I've really enjoyed my time with you. Now, who hearing that would take offense to that? If they did take offense to that, that's their thinking. I mean, surely that person wouldn't want to be with you if you were forcing yourself to be with them, if you didn't really want to be with them. You know, so it comes down to just common sense. And
Yeah.
who cares if you get rejected? You know, it's just telling you that, okay, that wasn't the right relationship. Thank you for letting me know that early on. Right? It's so much gentler and easier than many of us, and certainly myself. I used to do a number to myself about these sorts of things, these questions.
Lori, Maurice has a question for us.
Oh, Maurice, where are you? There you are.
Hi, Laurie. Hi, Mark.
Hi, Maurice.
Delighted. I'm actually Morris, as opposed to Maurice. Morris.
Oh,
The Americans tend to pronounce it Maurice.
Yeah. Thanks for correcting me.
Morris.
No problem. A privilege to be on the call, and yeah, it's a really nice way of spending Valentine's evening. Yeah, I had two questions, but I'll just ask one. I think so yeah, something I struggle with at the moment is what do I want? So like I could come up with a list. It's like if I could have exactly what I want, it would be maybe this list. The person would be like this, but I sort of think, well, you've got to be realistic as well. And then, I get all sorts of different sound bites from somebody, you gotta be open to, it's like one thing like that if I was writing a short list would be like London based,
Oh,
but I met a lovely woman who's in Germany last week, so yeah, without saying more about that, can you maybe make some comments or help me out?
Well, I have a feeling my response to that might be a little different than Mark's, because I know that that's very popular to create a list of what you want. But I'm wondering if you go into a date with someone and you've got a list on your mind of what you're looking for, if that's going to get in your way of just being with somebody heart to heart, and when, in my experience, when I connect with somebody, they might be really different than the list I would have in my head. And vice versa, I could meet somebody who matches my list of, the top 10 qualities and wonder, why are we not connecting here?
yeah.
Why is this not going further? Because on paper, it's the perfect person. So does that make sense? That in some ways it's having thinking on your mind, I think. I mean,
Well,
now there are certain, what do they call deal breakers?
yeah,
Deal breakers. But
sure.
other than the major ones.
Yeah.
Like a bank robber would be a deal breaker for me.
Could be a deal breaker.
A successful bank robber, or one that got caught?
I don't know. A successful bank robber, I don't know. I might be going on a lot of nice trips. I might have to take that off the list now. Well, look. You just have to be careful with characteristics. That's just the outside form. And if you really find a deep, loving connection with someone, you'll go beyond your list. You will go beyond your list, because a person in a certain state of mind shows themselves to have certain characteristics that meet your list or miss your list. But if you go deeper, they don't matter. Honestly, they don't matter. I've had so many, this is a little different, but I've had so many couples who, once they found their love again, many of the issues did not exist anymore.
Right.
They're just gone because they found what they were looking for, and they saw the ridiculousness of having to, get bothered over some of these issues. Now, there were some issues that they did need to talk about, but they did that with understanding.
Yeah.
So if you carry that with you, you got to be careful, because even if somebody meets your list, or even misses some of your list, there's more to them. And that's what you're looking for. So like you said, you the feeling of you just saying, I just met this lovely girl in Germany. You could see already that feeling is taking off London from your list, or it might have the potential to take London off your list. Why? Because of the feeling, a lovely person. So just be careful with that, because people are beyond a personality or characteristics, and you want to go find those. When you find those, that'll tell you what you got.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I'm curious about your second question.
My second question was how any tips on quietening the mind going on a date. Sometimes it feels like, it's I don't know. I mean, I'm not a particularly anxious person, but I sort of feel like I'm not getting like a heavy stream of dates. So it's like when I do, it's like, I don't know, it feels a little bit more intense than I'd like it to be.
Yeah,
I'd like to be more relaxed and be able to listen to someone deeper than I feel like I'm capable of at the moment.
Well, Morris, the way it seems to me is that it's like an evolution. That the more, the fact that you're noticing that you get really caught up in your thoughts, that's wonderful, because we have to notice that we're getting caught up in order to let it go. Right? If we don't notice that we're getting caught up, we just stay in that washing machine of thought. So you just be, patient with yourself and gentle with yourself, that you'll have these clear-minded moments and it'll feel so great that you're going to automatically go in that direction more often, because the feeling is so nice. It's very, it's magnetic. It's compelling to want to find that feeling again. Yeah. So, like, welcome to my humanity. Anybody on this webinar who doesn't get caught up in a bunch of thinking at times? We all do. I would venture to say, right? You want to add something to that, Mark?
I thought that was really nice what you shared. I think you shared earlier about getting curious about the other person. And it's an aspect of this listening process that I've come to see very deeply. And I think that's an aspect that helps, is to just try to get curious about this other person that you're meeting.
Yeah. And
I don't mean just hear one thing and try to imagine what that's like. I mean, just really wonder how they're putting that together for them. How is that fun for them? What is that experience like for them? And I think that's a way to kind of lose yourself in the journey of of discovering this other person.
Yeah.
That helps me, is to always try to get my thinking to the feeling of wondering about this person or curious with this person.
Yeah. Just
try to find their way of life, be interested in how they put life together.
Mm-hmm.
And as that starts to, you get the feeling of that, you'll come out. You'll just naturally come out. Lori, I'm looking at the fact of time, and I'm wondering whether this is the time we should kind of wrap the webinar up.
Ooh. Yeah, I guess it's 4:00 here already. Boy, that flew.
Yeah.
Oh, I want to make a little announcement to everybody. There's a Facebook group called Conscious Dating Community. So I'd love to have you, if you're not already on there. Some of you are, I recognize, but if you're not already there, join us, because it's you could private message me there. You can post for the whole group. And it's a lot of fun. I really enjoy that group because we're all talking about, shared experiences. And I was also going to talk about that Mark and I are going to get deeper into the principles in a few weeks, and it's March 6th, right? Do I have that right? March 6th at 3 o'clock again, Eastern Standard Time, and I'll send out an announcement to everybody. So that would be great to invite your friends to attend who don't know anything about the principles yet. And it's always great to have people who are students as well as teachers of the principles on these webinars.
We're going to share the hope, the hope that comes from the principles for developing relationships, dating, and so forth. So it'll give us a nice foundation as we go forward. Now, in between these webinars, if you'd like to drop us a line or a question, Lori, how could they connect with you?
Well, I think on the conscious dating community, through a private message is really best, or I think you all have my email because I sent something out with the login information with my email address on there, Lori@3principlestherapy.com. And what's your email, Mark?
Yeah, my email is Dr. Mark Howard, just my name, Dr. Mark Howard @comcast.net. So if a question comes up or you want to share something with either one of us, feel free to do that. So this has been great. This has been really a nice kickoff, Lori.
Yeah, I love that.
Kickoff.
I know. This was so much fun. Thank you all for coming.
Yeah, nice seeing all of you.
Yeah, it was great. And all the different time zones involved too. So if you had to get up early or you're late where you are, thank you so much for being a part of this first webinar. Look forward to hearing from you.
Okay, bye everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Boy, that went fast. Wow. Felt like 15 minutes, Mark. Do you have to jump off right away?
I do, Lori. We should stop the recording though.
Oh, how do we do that? Recording.
Hold on one second.
I stop recording.